Welcome to this FMX 2021 presentation with the title 3D Urban Environments. Let's get started. My name is Matthias Bühler and I'm the founder and CTO of Urban Solutions. My background originally is in classic architecture, and we as a company are an official Esri partner, and we are city engine specialists. So altogether, me personally, and now doing this for a couple of years with my company, I've been in this field for about 12 years, so urban modeling with some procedural components. Cool. Just a quick shout out to some other workshops, or actually for a shout out to Esri, and they have their own track also today. Actually, the first talk is already in parallel to mine, but as these presentations are recorded, I'm sure you can go watch the other videos. So talk number 1 is what's new in City Engine 2021. Talk 2, procedural urban 3D environments for games and movies. I will actually also have a small part in that presentation, so please also go see that presentation. And then kind of a showcase scenario where about procedural Washington that was produced by Esri for the Discovery Channel. So really cool track. So please go have a look there. Sweet. So agenda. What are we going to talk about? So first of all, quick intro about Urban Solutions, what it is that we are doing. Then also kind of the focus and why. We're going to have a look at an example work in progress project, which I did some time ago. And then we'll have a quick look at urban studios. And then we're diving into the Q&A. So, Urban Solutions, who are we, or who we are? So we were founded 2017 and we're at the moment 8 employees, and we're located close to Zurich in Switzerland. So we've also been awarded by one of the Esri Partner Awards 2018. And the gentleman right next to me that you see here is Jack Dangermond, actually founder and president of Esri Inc. And Esri, for those that don't know the term or the company, Esri is actually the world leading GIS technology company. So they are providing quite a lot of software packages and methodologies or tools to save, store and process geographic data. And also live feeds from based on everything is based on geographic data. So, what are the applications that, or in the fields that we are working? So, we don't work in a specific, let's say, industry. But we can produce results, or we can work with companies out of the field of games, visual effects, virtual production, AR, VR, and so on. And so the reason is we have some people with a background in architecture. We have engineers. We are highly knowledgeable in the field of optimization for example, geometries and like levels of detail, draw call optimization, and so on for games, which is necessary still for games. Then we are working on an internal large library, which makes us efficient for especially for realistic environments. And then we also have a shop. I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes. So in general, you could say, where do we work? Well, kind of wherever there's either 3D architecture or 3D environments needed specifically. Just a couple of screenshots of projects that we've worked on over the last couple of years. So this one here is a virtual reconstruction of the city of Zurich 5,000 years ago. So that was for a virtual reality animation that we did. Then this one here was one of a couple of 3D worlds that are quite abstract, quite artistic. And that's a reconstruction of Tel Aviv of the year 1932, I believe, 32 or 35, by the original plan of Patrick Geddes. That's the way how he imagined this so-called White City. This world was created in the context of the Architecture Biennale 2018, so quite a prestigious architecture exhibition. Then in the field of games, we've been working with for this game called Transport Fever 2 for a game studio, or Swiss game studio called Urban Games, which is kind of transport simulation game. And so we provided most of the architecture for them, or the architectural models. And then this cool project here is King Sakir. This was for a Turkish kids movie that was playing in cinemas, was quite successful, or highly successful actually. And for this one we created this completely procedural, kind of cartoony looking, but still realistic looking representation of Istanbul. Yeah. Then what we're also doing is we're developing some internal tools to produce highly realistic types of architecture. We will also dive more into this. Yeah. So, what is our focus and why? So we are uniquely focusing on the creation of 3D architecture and 3D environments. I mentioned that before. So we are not a typical VFX studio, or we are not a typical games studio. But some of those studios and some of other industries can be our clients. Now, what we actually are as Urban Solution, that's kind of as the name implies, is we're providing solutions in the field of like urban 3D environments. So we are basically technical consultants. Now, the reason why is, first of all, 3D architecture is hard. There are lots of different, geographic styles of architecture. There are lots of different types of constructions. There are different epochs, like, for example, Baroque or modern or postmodern architecture, and so on. So there's a lot of theory behind that, and I believe that's one of the advantages which we have, because we're rooted so deeply in actual classic architecture. The second of all is the whole 3D engineering part of 3D graphics, or in general kind of graphics engineering, is hard in the sense of it's very, very technical. And the bigger 3D environment that you have to create, the more components you have to think about and kind of keep in track. Now, then there comes a third, and I believe this is kind of one of the most important aspects of the whole thing, is whenever you're telling a story, and usually all of our clients are telling a story or have a vision how they want the story to be told. So this translation process of taking a vision of a story and translating it into, let's say, polygons and textures or into visuals, that is something that needs quite a lot of experience. So we believe this is a reason that why we want to kind of provide the first two elements, the architecture with the engineering, so that we can take off these two, let's say, hard sections off our clients, so they can focus on whatever it is that they have their core expertise in. So in this last point, there are actually 3 sub-points. So the first of all is the strategic approach. How do you tackle this specific project? Then the whole management side of things, regarding I don't know, staffing of artists, production timeline, where are all the technical pitfalls, how are they influencing the budget, and so on. So there are a myriad of little details that typically you have to think of. Yeah, and then the third thing, which is also very important, is the whole psychology aspect of how do you tell a story, or what it is, what are the elements that you can leverage in a 3D environment that kind of help to support the story. And all of these things kind of go together in this amalgamate of expertises that we are providing specifically for 3D architecture and 3D environments. So if you're looking at a typical 3D project, and this doesn't necessarily need to be this isn't specifically only for visual effects or for a game production. This could also be for let's say for an advertisement for a car, or for another scientific simulation or something like that. So there are typically lots of different elements, like, for example, you need some staff, like human resources. You have a concept phase of how do you want to tackle the overarching visuals. Then you have production management, animation, effects, rendering, either offline or in real time, and so on and so on. And so if you're looking at some of those components, and they're visualized now in blue, so things like concept, architectural research, assets, pipeline, or environment design, all of those kind of touch 3D architecture and 3D environments in just multiple phases of a typical project. So either at the very beginning in the concepting phase, or at later on, for example, in the pipeline engineering, if you want to, for example, render an entire landscape or city. So these are the points where we can come in and support a project. Yeah. So I just quickly mentioned before, we're working on an internal library just to help us to ramp up with content, in the sense of we can go in and produce urban environments leveraging that library. And so here's a very small set of the assets which we have developed. And the system is designed, or the whole internal tool set is designed that we can expand also in, for example, different types of architectures or different types of geographic styles. So we're not limited in that regard. And now this is just the kind of the off-the-shelf stuff that we're developing, but depending on a project that a specific client may have, we will obviously adapt to that. Now, for the internal stuff, as I mentioned, we're producing lots of different assets, and all of those assets completely consistently all have 3 levels of detail, which makes it very useful, or kind of, because we want to produce the same type of content for offline and real-time rendering, we needed to have our own LOD system, or the content at least produced in multiple LODs. And so this is why we are doing that for the entire library that we're building up. And then for the creation of the individual building, at the moment for the internal tools, we have a methodology of creating up to 5 levels of detail, going from very highly detailed, let's say the building on the top left that you see is 11,000 triangles, down to consistently without or with an absolute minimal LOD pop between the LODs, down to 2 triangles for if the building is very, very far away, like a couple of kilometers or so away from camera. And then I mentioned this before, we are trying to build up the library so that it's kind of independent of either visual effects or real-time applications for VR, for games, for scientific simulations, and so on. So the whole definition of the buildings that we are creating for that internal tool set is kind of independent of the tools or of the target DCC platform. So in this case here, what we are seeing is a building for Unity. And then in the next slide, we will see the same building for Unreal. And yet in the next slide, we will see it in Redshift. So I'm just quickly jumping back and forth. So the lighting conditions always usually switch a tiny little bit because they have different lighting models, different material models, and so on. But we're writing the importers so that taking this kind of also out of the hands of the user, because importing or converting materials to multiple DCC apps or game engines is usually very painful, and we're trying to also solve this so that there's a really cool drag and drop experience. So at the moment we have Unity, Unreal, and Redshift, and there are more that we're looking into. Next will most probably, or is going to be V-Ray, and then we will continue to add more and more of those. Yeah. Then just something that I thought would be creative. It's a kind of a hobby project that we did internally a couple months back, and it looks like this. It's just a kind of a small project, but I thought to show a potential like flow of a project, and this was really an inspiring project to me, and I just wanted to show you or share this kind of process in this project. So the inspiration was actually by this movie called City of Ember. It's one of the coolest movies I've ever seen. It's not super well known, but it's very fun. Please go watch it. So, and I'm not going to go into the story. It was just the inspiration for this project. So I thought, let's go in and just block out the scene. I did that in Maya with just 3 very simple locations of mountains. And then the idea obviously was to suspend a city between those 3 mountains. And then we continued, and we created just a very simple blocky layout of the main core of the city. First of all, on top is more the kind of, there's the social layers that we envisioned, that in the top part there's more kind of the ruling class, and then in the lower parts that are not yet visible in these, they will be connected to these yellow kind of bars. Let's actually move on. There are these platforms for the lower social level, or the kind of the working class that are suppressed in this kind of dystopian environment. So there are these platforms that we created. On the platforms there are these stacks of containers, so it's kind of a container slum city which is suspended underneath the main ring of the upper level. Then to kind of, because everything must be slightly wobbly when it's windy, there are these cables which we actually produced in a small procedural system in Houdini, and then brought over back to City Engine. And then just kind of having these old dangerous, because they may fall off, kind of tendons underneath the city. Then combined the upper part, the lower parts with the slums, everything suspended with the hanging debris and with the hanging cables all together. And then obviously that's kind of the sad part of this fictional environment. The lower you are, the higher the chances are that your entire section of of your city may fall off and fall down to the floor. So the story is not yet written for this kind of for this environment. So if you have an idea, let me know. Yeah. So continuing with was then to actually go in and very roughly sculpt the environment and the mountain ranges. Then we went in and processed that stuff in Houdini, kind of procedurally subdividing the things and adding more detail to the rock formations. And then continuing with vegetation distribution, and then kind of combine everything into the shot that was to be rendered, and then do the actual rendering and just slight touch of Photoshop work. Yeah, that's it for this project. Obviously, you see, it was just a very quick kind of showcase project, but it kind of shows the approach that we typically take for a project in this scope. So let's quickly talk about the shop buildings. So next to Urban Solutions, what we have is a second business unit called Urban Studios. And Urban Studios is kind of like a second branch that we have that is responsible for off-the-shelf buildings that you can just purchase off a store and use drag and drop within one of the before mentioned platforms. At the moment, it's Unity, Unreal, and Redshift in combination with Houdini. But as I mentioned, there will be more. So the focus that we have for this content is that is fully consistent architecture-wise, so that there's when there is a balcony, there's actually also a door that is connected to that balcony, or things like that, so that depending on the geographic style, that the architecture kind of fits well within that target intended geography. So there's this aspect of consistency architecture-wise. Then the whole thing should be fully PBR with fully realistic materials. Then the optimization side of things, I mentioned that before, all the buildings are draw called optimized. They have 4 levels of detail. They are also coming with a collision mesh, and so that all together they're fully drag and drop capable. And also if you're buying, for example, multiple packs of buildings of the content that you like, you can combine those, and kind of it takes content of textures that maybe appear once or twice in a couple of packs, but you can still combine everything and it will work independent of the number of packs that you're buying. Yeah, so let's move on. Let's have a look at a couple of examples. So here's one, or actually multiple buildings of this off-the-shelf content. In this case, it's in the Los Angeles style, like a large commercial building. Then there's a second example of something that is more like residential multi for multifamily housing, something like this. And then there are also skyscrapers that we are producing, obviously. Then this one here, just to mention that the buildings are compatible to everything. This screenshot here was actually ray traced in the Unreal Engine. And yeah, I kind of like this image. Sweet. I'm deviating. Yeah, so applications, obviously, it's virtual production is obviously a very important topic in the entertainment industries at the moment, and this is also one of the bigger, let's say, influences why we decided that we want to create our buildings both compatible to the real-time world, but also to the offline rendering kind of VFX world. So what this allows is actually taking the same buildings and working in a hybrid pipeline that actually supports both of the sides. So for example, for previs or for concept art or just for shot blocking or whatever it is, you can use the real-time representation of the buildings, for example in Unreal. Then track your camera and also the kind of save the information of where the buildings were placed. Bring everything over to a post-production or into the post-production pipeline, and then start rendering with the super high quality representation of the buildings, and to kind of take the start data, bring it over to the render side, and produce the shots there in final quality. This can then look something like this one here. This is a very short demo shot which we made together in collaboration with Equeta Arts. So thanks Yvonne for that collaboration. And what we're seeing here is a couple of the the pre-made buildings that we have, the off-the-shelf content. We just placed them, added a couple more things on top, like a tiny little bit of matte painting on the left-hand side of the building. We added a couple cars in the parking lot. On the right-hand side, you see an Equeta Arts sign, and the little ladder on the right. We just added this as to detail, also the crane in the background, and so on. And so like this, you can take some of the very let's say neutral buildings, just place them in a scene, add a couple more details to make the buildings lively, or like an animated flag or things like that. Place some cars and some more random elements that depend on your specific type of shot or game, and then produce something like we see here. There's another example also that is based on actual geographic data of Los Angeles. So both the terrain and all of the building locations are actually created based on real world geographic building positions or like footprints. And then the system which we implemented here was kind of just pick the best building out of the library and fit it onto the actual building footprint. And so including the far background here, we have a couple of 100,000 instances of buildings. So obviously the base set is a lot smaller, but we're continuing to add more and more buildings to our libraries. Okay, and last but not least, I would like to showcase a very quick real-time demo which was done in Unity. So there's a downloadable demo executable which you can find under bit.ly/3rrhtlx. So let's have a quick look at the video. Cool. So this was it for my presentation about Urban Solutions and what we are doing. I hope you got inspired by the content. If you have any type of questions, let us know. There's an email address, info@vrbn.io. There's also solutions@vrbn.io. That's brand new. So yeah, right at this point in time, we're gonna dive into the Q&A. I will be available for your questions also now in this live session. So thank you so much for the attention in this video, and talk to you very soon. Bye bye. Take care.